The 1960s weren't just loud, they were restless. Young people were marching in the streets. Politicians were being challenged. Old rules were starting to crack. And sometimes, all it took was one voice and one guitar to make the whole country feel it. These are the songs that didn't just play on the radio. They shook the culture. Let's begin. Number 10. The Times They Are A-Changin', Bob Dylan, 1964.
Gather round, people, wherever you roam.
In 1964, Bob Dylan was just 22 years old, but he sounded like a prophet. He recorded this song in a single take. Just voice, just guitar, no band, no distraction, and what he delivered felt less like a hit single and more like a warning. Come senators, congressmen, please heed the call.
And admit that the waters around you have grown.
He wasn't whispering anymore. He wasn't hiding behind poetic riddles. This time, he was direct. The song arrived during one of the most explosive years in American history. The Civil Rights Act was being debated. Young men were facing the draft. College campuses were boiling with protest. And Dylan did something dangerous. He told the older generation that their world was fading.
Grown and accept it that soon you'll be drenched to the...
He warned parents not to stand in the doorway. He warned politicians to listen. He told critics that the tide was rising whether they liked it or not. Conservative commentators called him irresponsible. Radio stations received angry calls. Some said he was encouraging rebellion. They weren't entirely wrong. Dylan wasn't calling for violence. He was calling for change. And for a country built on tradition and authority, that was threatening enough. What made the song powerful wasn't anger. It was inevitability. He didn't argue. He didn't debate. He simply stated a fact. The times were changing, and there was nothing anyone could do to stop it.
If your time to you is worth saving.
By the end of 1964, the song had become an anthem for a generation that felt completely disconnected from their parents' values. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't loud, but it carried weight. Because sometimes the most controversial thing you can do is tell the truth calmly. Number 9. White Rabbit, Jefferson Airplane, 1967.
Makes you larger, and one pill makes...
By 1967, the summer of love was in full bloom. San Francisco had become the center of a cultural earthquake, psychedelic posters, underground radio, a generation experimenting with everything. And then came a song that never once said the word drugs, but everyone knew exactly what it meant.
And the ones that mother gives you.
Grace Slick had written White Rabbit before joining Jefferson Airplane. Inspired by Alice in Wonderland, she built the lyrics around imagery parents once read to their children. Mushrooms, growing larger, chasing rabbits. Then came the line, feed your head. Radio programmers didn't need a translator.
Don't do anything at all.
Some stations banned it immediately. Others debated whether the metaphors were too obvious. But FM radio was rising, and underground DJs embraced it. The song builds slowly, almost hypnotically. It starts quiet, controlled. Then it climbs, layer by layer, until Slick's voice becomes commanding, almost urgent. It felt less like a pop song and more like an experience. What made White Rabbit controversial wasn't explicit rebellion. It was the mirror it held up to adults. Parents who read fairy tales to their kids suddenly realized those stories weren't as innocent as they seemed. The counterculture had found its symbolism. And at festivals like Monterey Pop and later Woodstock, the song became a defining moment of the psychedelic movement. It represented curiosity, exploration, a rejection of conventional thinking. To one generation, it was dangerous. To another, it was liberation. And like many songs of the 60s, the controversy only made it more powerful. Because the louder critics tried to silence it, the more young people wanted to hear it. Number 8. I Feel Like I'm Fixin' to Die Rag, Country Joe and the Fish, 1967.
In a terrible jam, way down the yonder in Vietnam. So put down your books and pick up.
If most protest songs of the 60s sounded serious, this one sounded cheerful. And that was exactly the point. Released in 1967 at the height of the Vietnam War, I Feel Like I'm Fixin' to Die rag disguised razor-sharp criticism inside a bouncy, almost vaudeville-style melody. It opened with a chant that audiences quickly memorized. Then came the sarcasm.
Give me an eye!
Country Joe McDonald sang about sending young men off to war, like it was a patriotic game show. He mocked politicians. He mocked military leaders. He mocked the blind optimism that masked a growing tragedy. The melody invited you to clap along. The lyrics made you uncomfortable. Radio stations refused to play it. Too blunt, too angry, too direct. But at rallies and college campuses, it spread like wildfire. And then came Woodstock.
Say I need your help again. Got himself in a terrible jam.
In 1969, Country Joe performed it solo before a crowd of nearly 500,000 people. When he led the audience in the famous chant, the sound rolled like thunder across the field.
Give me a U! Give me a C!
It wasn't subtle, it wasn't poetic, it was raw. To some Americans, the song felt disrespectful to soldiers. To others, especially young men facing the draft, it felt honest.
Land, won't you pack your boys off to Vietnam? Come on, fathers, don't hesitate.
What made it controversial wasn't just its message, it was the tone. By wrapping war criticism in satire, the song forced listeners to confront an uncomfortable question. If this is funny, why does it feel so real? And in a decade filled with protest music, few songs captured the frustration of the anti-war movement so bluntly. Sometimes the sharpest protest doesn't shout. Sometimes it smiles while it says the truth. Number 7. Street Fighting Man, The Rolling Stones, 1968. By 1968, the world felt like it was on edge. Paris was erupting in student riots. Chicago police were clashing with protesters at the Democratic National Convention. Television screens showed cities burning. And into that chaos, the Rolling Stones released Street Fighting Man. From the first drum beat, it sounded urgent, raw, restless. Mick Jagger had attended anti-war demonstrations in London and watched the violence unfold in America. The tension was everywhere. You could feel it in the streets. The time is right for fighting in the street. That line alone was enough to make radio executives nervous. Stations in Chicago banned the song immediately. They feared it would inflame already volatile protests. Other cities quietly pulled it from rotation. But here's what made it complicated. Jagger didn't clearly endorse revolution. He sang about wanting to be a street fighting man, but also about feeling powerless. Was it a call to action or a commentary on the chaos? No one could quite tell. And that ambiguity made it even more dangerous. The song captured something deeper than politics. It captured frustration, the sense that something had to give, but nobody knew how. The Rolling Stones had already built a reputation as rock's bad boys. This only strengthened it. They weren't polished. They weren't safe. They sounded like the decade itself, loud and unpredictable. What made Street Fighting Man controversial wasn't just the lyrics, it was timing. In 1968, even sounding revolutionary was enough to scare people, and the louder authorities tried to contain the unrest, the more songs like this felt inevitable. Because when history starts moving fast, music moves with it. Number 6. Fortunate Son, Creedence Clearwater Revival, 1969.
Made to wave the flag, ooh, the red, white, and blue.
By 1969, the Vietnam War wasn't just headlines. It was funerals, draft notices, and growing anger. Then came Fortunate Son. John Fogerty wrote it after watching the wedding of David Eisenhower, the grandson of a former president. The contrast hit him hard. While sons of privilege celebrated in Washington, working-class kids were being drafted and sent overseas.
And when the band played, hail to the chief.
And Fogerty didn't hide his frustration. It ain't me. I ain't no senator's son. The song was short, just over 2 minutes, but it hit like a punch. It wasn't anti-soldier. It wasn't anti-America. It was anti-hypocrisy. Fogerty called out the imbalance, the sense that wealth and connections could protect some young men from combat, while others had no choice. Radio stations played it, but some were uneasy. The message was clear, and it wasn't flattering to those in power. Soldiers heard it differently. Many embraced it. They knew exactly what it meant. They had seen classmates find deferments. They had watched who went and who stayed home. Fortunate Son became an anthem not just for anti-war protesters, but for anyone who felt the system wasn't fair. What made it powerful was its simplicity. No complicated metaphors, no long speeches, just a raw voice saying what millions were thinking. And in a decade where music often tried to be poetic, sometimes the most controversial thing you could do was be direct. Number 5, Say It Loud, I'm Black and I'm Proud. James Brown, 1968. August 1968. America was still reeling from the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. Cities had burned, tensions were raw, and James Brown made a decision. He wasn't going to whisper. Say it loud. I'm black and I'm proud. It wasn't coded. It wasn't metaphor. It was a declaration. Say it loud! Brown had spent years carefully balancing crossover success, appealing to both black and white audiences. But this song drew a line. He brought children into the studio to sing the chorus. Their voices weren't polished. They were powerful. When they shouted the refrain back at him, it sounded like a generation claiming space. Some radio stations refused to play it. Program directors called it divisive. They worried it would inflame racial tensions. But black radio embraced it immediately. The song went to number 1 on the R&B chart and crossed over to the pop charts despite resistance. It became more than a hit. It became a rallying cry. What made it controversial wasn't anger. It was confidence. In a country where black Americans were often told to be patient, to wait, to stay quiet, Brown flipped the script. He wasn't asking for approval. He wasn't asking for permission. He was declaring pride. For some white listeners in 1968, that felt threatening. For many black listeners, it felt empowering. And that difference in reaction revealed just how divided the country had become. James Brown didn't write a complicated protest song. He wrote 4 words that still echo today. And sometimes that's all it takes to make history. Number 4, Eve of Destruction. Barry Maguire, 1965.
World, it is exploding, violence flaring.
In 1965, the optimism of early 60s pop was fading fast. The Vietnam War was escalating, civil rights marches were met with violence. The Cold War still cast a nuclear shadow. And then came a voice that sounded like it had seen too much. We're on the eve of destruction.
Bullets loading, you're old enough to kill.
Written by P.F. Sloan and recorded almost as a demo, Barry Maguire's version wasn't polished. His voice cracked. It rasped. It sounded urgent because it was. The lyrics didn't hint at problems. They named them Selma, Red China. Politicians avoiding truth. Radio stations panicked. Some banned it outright, calling it unpatriotic. Others claimed it was fear-mongering. A few rushed out, answer songs defending America. None of it stopped the record.
Can't you feel the fears I'm feeling today?
By September 1965, Eve of Destruction had reached number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100. That alone shocked critics. What made the song controversial wasn't subtle protest. It was bluntness. Maguire didn't hide behind poetry. He didn't soften the message. He sang like someone who believed the clock was ticking.
Take a look around you, boy. It's bound to scare you, boy.
For young listeners watching the news each night, The song felt honest. It sounded like the headlines. It sounded like their anxiety. For older listeners, it felt alarmist, overdramatic, dangerous. But that tension was the point. The mid-60s weren't calm, they weren't stable, and Eve of Destruction captured the fear that something fundamental was unraveling. It proved that even a rough demo-style recording could shake the country, if it said what people were afraid to say out loud. Number 3, For What It's Worth. Buffalo Springfield, 1967.
Something happening here. What it is ain't exactly.
Sometimes the most powerful protest songs don't shout, they observe. In 1966, Los Angeles authorities enforced a 10 p.m. curfew on the Sunset Strip, targeting young crowds gathering outside music clubs. Tensions rose, police made arrests, protesters pushed back. Stephen Stills watched it unfold, and in about 15 minutes, he wrote a song. There's something happening here. What it is ain't exactly clear.
Something happening here. What it is.
Released in early 1967, For What It's Worth didn't mention a specific war. It didn't name a political party. It didn't point fingers directly. Instead, it captured a feeling: paranoia, confusion, lines being drawn. The opening guitar riff was instantly recognizable, simple but haunting. It sounded cautious, almost like a warning.
There's a man with a gun over there.
Radio stations debated whether it was too inflammatory. Some hesitated, others embraced it. Either way, the song spread quickly. Soon it wasn't just about the Sunset Strip. It was played at anti-war demonstrations, civil rights rallies, college protests. The lyrics fit every gathering where people felt watched, controlled, misunderstood. What made it controversial wasn't aggression, it was ambiguity.
The man come and take you away.
Stills didn't preach, he didn't declare a side. He described a moment when trust between generations and institutions was breaking down. And that subtlety made it powerful. Because once you admit something's happening here, you can't pretend you don't see it. In a decade filled with louder protest songs, For What It's Worth proved that restraint can sometimes echo louder than anger. Number 2, Sympathy for the Devil. The Rolling Stones, 1968.
Me to introduce myself, I'm May.
By 1968, the Rolling Stones were already known for pushing limits. Then they released a song sung from the perspective of the devil. Pleased to meet you. Hope you guess my name. That opening line alone was enough to spark outrage. Religious groups protested. Some radio stations refused to play it. Parents were horrified.
Been around for a long, long year. So many.
The song referenced major historical tragedies, revolutions, assassinations, moments of human violence, all narrated by a charming, almost seductive voice. To many listeners, it sounded like glorifying evil. But Mick Jagger later explained that the inspiration came from literature, particularly the novel The Master and Margarita. The idea wasn't to celebrate darkness, but to confront it. The message was unsettling. The devil wasn't some distant monster. He was present in human actions. That nuance was lost in the controversy. In 1968, with assassinations, riots, and political unrest dominating headlines, a rock band singing from Satan's perspective felt like gasoline on a fire. The samba rhythm gave it a hypnotic pulse. The woo-woo backing vocals made it almost celebratory. And that contrast, upbeat music, disturbing perspective, made it unforgettable. The Stones weren't preaching. They weren't endorsing violence. They were holding up a mirror. But when society is already anxious, mirrors can feel dangerous. The controversy only strengthened the band's reputation as rock's provocateurs. And more than 50 years later, the song still makes new listeners pause. Because sometimes the most controversial art isn't what it says. It's the point of view it forces you to hear. Number 1, Revolution, The Beatles, 1968. By 1968, even the Beatles couldn't stay neutral. The world was erupting. Paris protests, anti-war marches, political assassinations. Young people were demanding change. And for the first time, the Beatles addressed it head-on. John Lennon wrote "Revolution" not as a slogan, but as a question. You say you want a revolution. But then came the hesitation. Lennon wasn't sure. He believed in change. He believed in justice. But he wasn't convinced that destruction was the answer. The band recorded two versions, a slower, bluesy take filled with tension, and a faster, louder rock version released as the B-side to Hey Jude. Both caused controversy, just from opposite directions.
We'd all love to change the world.
Conservatives accused the Beatles of encouraging unrest. Radical activists accused Lennon of backing down. Students in Paris and London who had blasted Beatles records at protests felt confused. Was Lennon with them? Or not? That was the problem. Revolution didn't offer certainty. It reflected doubt. In a year when people demanded clear sides, Lennon gave them complexity. Radio stations debated which version to play, commentators dissected every lyric, fans argued. For the most famous band in the world, even nuance became controversial. What made Revolution powerful wasn't anger. It was honesty. Lennon captured the emotional conflict of 1968, wanting a better world, but fearing what chaos might bring. And in doing so, the Beatles proved something important. In the 1960s, you couldn't stand still. Even silence became a statement.